Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Scouting for Growth podcast. I'm your host, Sabine VdL, and I am beyond thrilled about today's episode. We have a unique guest joining us, a person whose work is transforming lives and helping individuals and organizations thrive like never before by reconnecting with self, situational members, and society. Yes, her name is Marcy Axelrod. She is a best-selling and award-winning author, TV contributor, two-time TEDx speaker, and renowned management consultant. Her latest book, How We Choose to Show Up, has recently been honored with the prestigious Hayakawa Book Prize. With over 20 years at research and hands-on experience, and you will hear this during our conversation, Marcy has worked with some of the world's largest high-tech companies, including HP, SAP, and Cisco, helping them innovate and achieve exponential growth. But Marcy's impact doesn't stop there. Drawing from a rich background that spans Wall Street and Silicon Valley, her work has been highly praised by academics from Harvard, Yale, Stanford, Columbia, and Cornell. She integrates disciplines like neuroscience, psychology, behavioral economics, and evolutionary biology with top consulting strategies to help people, companies, and societies succeed. In today's conversation, we will dive deep into the concepts from her book. We will explore the idea of showing up, the invisible system connecting us to our society, our situation, ourselves, and each other. Marcy will guide us through the choices we make every day. Do we just show up, improvising as we go? Do we truly show up, living decisive moments with intent? Or are we barely there, struggling to show up at all? We will discuss how understanding and embracing the way we choose to show up can lead to a happier, more effective, and balanced life, whether we are parenting, coaching, playing, empowering others, or steering a global company. So, whether you are an entrepreneur looking to scale your business, a corporate leader aiming to inspire your team, or an investor scouting for the next big opportunity, or even someone on a personal journey of growth, this episode is packed with insights that can help you connect more deeply with yourself and others. Without further ado, let's welcome Marcy Axelrod to the Scouting for Growth podcast. Marcy, welcome. It is just such a pleasure to have you with us today. Hi, Marcy. Thank you so much for joining me on Scouting for Growth.
It is such an honor to be here with you, Sabine. You do so many things that are so helpful to different groups, to startups, to large companies. And I'm thrilled to get to know you better and to be able to be part of it in some small way.
Oh, thank you. And I know a lot of my startup corporate clients, corporate following, but also investors will take a lot from this discussion because we are going to talk about things that often people do not think about. But before going into that, let's just talk about Marcy, right? Tell us a little bit more about your parcours, where you come from and what got you into exploring this individual intentionality, which I learned from you by just checking out the book recently.
So I will answer that. I also would love to make sure that we come back to something that you just said, which is that we're going to talk about something that people often don't think about. So I would love for me to hear it, but for your listeners to hear it. So what got me to showing up and individual intentionality? I'm going to change the word individual to all individual, but we will get there in due time. Yeah. So I was 6 years old when my family moved from Baltimore to Boston. And with, my parents had new jobs and they were focused, my sibling couldn't care less about me as most siblings don't when they're older. And I needed something I wasn't getting. And when you're 6, you can't really put your finger on it. But it was a transition for me too. And in that transition, it was like I was just swept up in the breeze. So there was no one kind of making me feel felt. And that's what all humans need. So since I'm not someone who acts out, I kind of acted in and took it out on myself. So I lost the ability to speak. It was, a predisposition to stuttering that was in the genetics. But then, of course, the environment is what brings everything to life, right? What's around us? What's going on? And we feel that inside. It's in our nervous system. All of those stressors show up every day in some way. So I ended up stuttering to an extent where I didn't want to speak, and I ended up observing, but observing with an edge, right? With that emotion of, there's a person over there and they're showing up as a bully. And then there's that kid over there who's supposedly their friend, but he's really a scaredy cat. And then there are the educators, and why aren't they helping? So I became this natural and just deeply driven observer of how others are showing up. And the phrasing, the words that created the belief system in my mind, the words were, they can show up as they choose, and yet they are not choosing. While I am choosing, I want to show up, I want to be able to communicate, I want to help others, I want to be kind, and I couldn't. So that's what started me on my path. From age 10 to 12, I was reading every psychology book I could find, behavioral economics, although we didn't call it that at the time. Neuroscience. All of these things were kind of in me from a very, very, very young age. So that's what got me to showing up. Should I turn now to the individual intentionality that you mentioned?
Yes, let's actually explain what intentionality, individuality, and actually you said there's an extension to that means as well, so that we're actually starting with some of the baseline.
Yeah, so I love that you really took the time. You took the time to read the book, Sabine. Wow. Most hosts, they'll kind of read the website, maybe scan a few things, and it's clear that they haven't read the book. You really took the time, and what you pulled out of it is an individual intentionality. That's extremely important, but I want to talk about the word individual, because one of the main things that the book does is it says, look, back from evolutionary times, when we lived in a cave, we were never just in one role. Picture us, Aboriginal, wearing whatever loincloth or whatever we happen to have on, fur from an animal so that we weren't freezing. We were always, yes, an individual distinct from, but we were also a member of something called, let's say, a family, a member of something beyond that called a tribe. We were very much at the whim of the environment. Is there a tiger there? Is it freezing cold? Do we have water? So one of the main things that the book talks about is it shifts us back from solely an individual, in as in like inside, like mirror facing us, turned inward. And it says, wait a minute, that's not the truth. It's just not the truth about how we are designed as human beings to show up. We are designed actually in three roles. And what society does with words like individual and words like self-care and kind of the competitiveness and the incentive systems and just the way that we're taught to think from a very, very young age leaves us thinking we're far more just an individualized self, when really our pie chart should look more like a peace sign. Yes, you're a discrete self. Discrete is not separate from or distinct, right? It is not separate from. We are a situation member. At all moments, we can talk about what a situation is, what a member is, because it's not what people think. And we are, of course, a member and defined by the fact that there's a society out there that creates who we are. And we create it as part of the collective. So we're in three roles in much more equal distribution. And I'll stop there, but the impacts are vast and we live them every day.
Yeah. So let's go into the book, right? How we choose to show up. And when I went into the book, I could see this ladder going from, red to green, passing
Yep.
by orange, right? Which actually explore the difference between just showing up and
Yes.
truly showing up. So can you
Right.
explain those terms and what they mean, their distinction, and why it is
Yep.
crucial for people to understand that from a personal and professional viewpoint? Because you highlighted we have a number of roles. We have probably three roles, right, in society, and often we are designed by society, by our parents. We have a lot of bias as well as a result of that. And so how do we make sure we learn to truly show up?
Yes. I will show that diagram and I'll give it to you to put up on the website. First, I want to just quickly show the diagram of what we just talked about.
Yeah.
These are the three roles. You can even call them existences because role makes it seem like it's optional.
Mm-hmm.
Being a member of a situation and being a member of society, those are not optional. You can't opt out. We often live it as if, the self is the main thing because that's what we're taught. And these are the pie charts that people draw when I'm in a workshop and I say, what is your true distribution about how you live your life? People might make themselves slightly smaller and say, oh, I strive to be mindful. I strive to really presence within the moment. That's great. Mindful is not going to get you there. Our cognition is not what's going to get you there, right? And this gets into the continuum, which I'll show in a moment. Our bodies are just sensing flow systems, and it's not a just, we are sensing flow systems. That is what we are. The skin exists because we can feel the world, temperature, pressure, motion, movement, the granularity and nuance, just as you touch the back of your hand of what we can perceive is just awe-inspiring. And then, of course, we have, ideally, right? We have vision, we have hearing, we have taste, and we have an intuition. I'll plant that one. That's a big one to come back to. But the point is, when we think about the self and how we're designed to show up, we're not designed to be an individual with a boundary that's closed off. This is a permeable membrane for a reason. Even medicine comes in through patches, but so does the entire world, right? So a big part of the show up continuum and what it means to be in level 3, and I'll show the continuum now, is recognizing what and who we truly are. So there's the target again, and there's 1, 2, 3. This is something that anyone can intuit, the model of how we show up. What I did is I put it on paper, right? This has always been with us because there are quality levels in everything. I just put a 1, 2, 3 on them. Barely there is in the left. It's in the red. You can guess, right? Burned out, exhausted, overly stressed. You really aren't engaged at all. You could care less, but this is also an extreme where you really can't show up in a meaningful way. There are valid reasons to be red. We all go through it as part of life. Grieving, what people are dealing with the storm of like, what now, right? Level 2 is in the orange, just showing up. My research across 20 years, when I ask people all sorts of questions, how often do you ask yourself, how do I want someone to feel in my presence? If you're not at all tuned into that, you're just showing up. Because we impact each other vastly. And I'll talk about that when I get into what a situation is. But level 2 is what we all know. It's like, you kind of wake up, you're in bed, you go straight to turn off your alarm clock. You go straight to, okay, now I've got to brush my teeth. Now I'm putting on clothes. It could be that there's something very, very different that's right over there, but we won't notice it. We are in our left hemisphere, just getting stuff done. Just getting stuff done. And it isn't bad. We have to be there some good portion of the time, up to 50%. of the time. We have to have a very narrow, deep focus that is tactical and practical, but it lives in the map. It's, I know my toothbrush is over there and I'm just going to grab it. I'm going to get it and I'm going to get something done. It doesn't look at like, wow, the invention of the toothbrush. What a miraculous, like, imagine if no one had invented this. How did people's mouths feel before we had this thing? And what about when we had it and it was early on and it was like destroying our teeth as we used it, right? So we aren't really living in this world that we're designed to live in where we're perceiving them more. So that's the just showing up. Should I move into truly showing up?
So before moving into truly showing up, I was thinking, I remember when we chatted that actually 80% of us, right? You mentioned to me 80% of us are just showing up. So as we go into truly showing up,
Right.
so please tell us, what are the implications of just showing up on our life?
Right. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I will. But I want to be careful with how we're talking about this because everyone and everything is on this continuum at every moment. Think about, our trees are changing now here in New York. When you think about a leaf that's gorgeous and fervent and it's drinking in the sunlight and it's the middle of summer, that leaf is no less as it is stunningly red and orange in front of me right now. And the leaf is no less as it gets to start to crumble and have spots on it. And then at some point it falls from the tree. But over time, and it's a relatively short period of time, Sabine, the leaf becomes dust and dirt. And then the rain comes and its nourishment is drank back into that tree, into the bushes around, but not just that individual tree. It fertilizes and nourishes a broader area than it did when it was on that tree as a leaf. So I want to be careful because that's what this continuum is. So we have to be, and we naturally dance along this every day. Some people wake up at 5 a.m. and they get more done before 8 a.m. than most of us do in an entire day. Those people are morning people. They've nourished their soul, they've got sleep, they probably also drink enough water, maybe get their exercise, meditate, journal, do all sorts of things. But at some point, they need a break and they're burned out and they're moving south. And then something bothers them, or that fear comes up. Or, my elder mother, I'm really concerned she's going to fall. I've got to get everyone on board. And now you're stressed and now you're here. So we dance along this. So I really want to be careful about the relationship of the three levels. There's a belief system, Sabine, behind how humans are designed to show up. And it's a really important one because what it does is it gets us back into the flow of how nature designed us. There's nothing cultish or woo-woo or mystical. It simply recognizes, you can't have up without down. You can't have left without right. You can't have some version of individual without there being a societal collective.
Yeah. So, when you think about what is happening right now, you mentioned the storm, right, affecting the United States right now. And
Right.
also we think about our individuality when we actually to fit in society, right? We have those three roles: self, situation members, and societal members.
Right.
So as we start truly showing up,
Yep.
what does really that mean for
Sure.
self or for
Yeah.
society?
Absolutely. So the first thing it means is you're no longer in your default mode, right? So, well, let me answer from a big picture, from the top down, and then I'll get into how in this moment you'll be able to tell where you are on the continuum. At a societal level, what it would mean for more people to truly show up, it would mean that our political discord is much lower. It would probably mean we don't have war. It would mean that people are kind. It would mean that we see each other human to human. The word to, like you saying something to you, would turn into with you and for you. We would be far more feeling what our heart is saying. we would be slowing down. We would be more gradual. We would be reflective. When someone who triggers us in that meeting is about to speak and our nervous system shoots up of, they're going to invalidate my ideas. They never make me look good in front of the boss. Instead of that, ideally, we're going to go and we're going to think about, didn't he just tell me before the meeting that his son was ill? We're going to say, you know what? That person has needs, just like I do. And some of those needs aren't met, right? And they have hopes and they have dreams. And so do I. So that's what society will be like. And Sabine, a lot of the products and services that are out there are trying to fix something that kind of society itself broke. A lot of, so we don't need them. So ideally, there would be this grand sculpting down, like what happens in the teenage brain, all the extra neurons, well, not all, a lot of them. I mean, it's a miraculous thing. They're getting pared away. All the stuff that we learned when we were very, very young, we don't need that gunk. And that's what the teen years are, according to Dr. Dan Siegel, a relatively well-known psychiatrist who developed the field of interpersonal neurobiology. He talks about the teen years going through age 29, and the neurons are paring down. So that's what our society would start to do. All the faux self-care stuff, regrounding ourselves in what the self role truly is, the big S self, not the small s, which we can get into. Regrounding ourselves in that. It's not from adding more. It's not from buying something that looks a certain way, or a candle with a certain scent, or cream for our face. No. It's about reconnecting ourselves with the fact that we are of the earth. There's a reason that listening to nature sounds for 10 seconds resets us. And guess what happens? A new thought comes in. We suddenly notice, you've been at this desk the whole day, but all of a sudden you notice something. Look at that. So that's what the world will be like when more of us truly show up. This is a right hemisphere function. I'm going to pause now, but the neuroscience behind this is that we are in our sensing system, and it's not just our creative system. We need to be very careful with what the right hemisphere is. Ian McGilchrist explained this, but I'm going to pause now so that if you have questions, we can.
Yeah. Well,
Forth,
I
but I'm
want to
very much
dive,
for it.
in this show up system. I would love for you to describe it better, because I guess when I look at your work, right, you already highlighted psychology. You actually combine neuroscience, psychology, behavioral economics, and actually my degree in France was in behavioral economics. So I do believe in social science and people, and evolutionary biology as well, right? So
Absolutely.
how does this discipline come together to build the show up system that you are going to describe a bit more for us now? And how can we use this in our daily life? You said we need to show up. We need to learn not just to be on in the self. We need to be part of society and observe what is going on around us.
Well, yes. Yeah. So the evolutionary biology part, I mean, Robert Sapolsky, who wrote Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers and a lot of other things. Most recently, his book is Behave. He is a professor for, 30 plus years at Stanford. Decades ago, he started to explain, I mean, look, we were designed out in nature, in the savannah. We were designed to have a relaxed state. But then when there's a tiger in the brush, we go from 0 to 100, like woo, like we can run, we can lift things. What happens in the body is that all the unnecessary systems go offline.
Mm-hmm.
So that we can have heroics happen in the muscles, in an acuity of vision that goes really, really narrow. Anyway, the point is we are designed to have stressors that are extremely short term, that get everything we've got to survive, and then to reset, okay? Society now is, our stressors are not like that. Our stressors are, why can't I lose that extra 10 pounds? I don't like, my pants are tight. My boss, like, I can't live being managed by this boss or the person over there who's competing. Our stressors don't do this. Our stressors go zoom on and on and on and on. And this is why we have a lot of the diseases that we have that are related to stress. So that's just one example of the evolutionary biological basis of showing up, because what showing up does is it regrounds us in the large S self definition of self, which is, let's recognize we exist not as a disparate, separate soul, which is why so many of us are lonely. But by the way, it's 30 to 50% in almost every age group that you look at, loneliness. It shows up in a lot of different ways. It shows up as gaining weight. It shows up as just not getting our stuff done. It shows up as, first it starts as not wanting to go out. It shows up as depression. It shows up as binge watching. It's like on and on and on. Anyway, showing up has built in the recognition that we're not designed for ongoing stressors. We're not designed to compete with each other the way society teaches us to compete. Society teaches us about an us and them, but no. What happens on the continuum is we are always flowing, and so is everybody else. And by the way, Sabine, this is important for the listeners to hear, so is everything else. So are, the wars that are going on, the changing of the leaves, levels of inflation, our bank accounts, whether a company understands what society truly wants to buy or what services, people need. What does it mean to achieve? These are all systems that flow based on in the flow systems that are out there, ideas, tech, how nourishing our food really is, or is it all prepared now? Whether we come together as a family and cook. Think about these things. So anyway, I hope that I've answered how showing up includes a lot of these things. In terms of psychology, psychiatry, neuroscience, so we have two attention systems in the brain. And the reason is because to survive, Sabine, we had to do two things. And these were very different things. And when you hear what they are, it's going to be like, oh, absolutely. I knew this all along, but I hadn't thought about the significance. So we had to feed ourselves. Think about grabbing, getting, power over, consume, destroy, feed ourselves, and not be fed to something else. Surveil a broad swath of things, recognize how things are connected, discern distances, right? Care about our next of kin, because if we're consumed, we can't care about everybody else, right? So that's the left and right. The left side, it can only represent the past. You want to live here now? There is no way you can be living in the left hemisphere. That means if you're stressed, if you have a fear, if you are, very underslept, if you're burned out, you are not going to be able to perceive anything new, because what shows up is your assumptions. This is the whole, the body keeps the score, right? Trauma lives in the body. That's the book. It's a blue covered book by a physician named Bessel van der Kolk. He's the head of the trauma center at Harvard's Mass General Hospital, where I actually spent a lot of time growing up because my father was also a professor there. The body keeps the score. And the point about the body is, if there's something that's stressing us, call it trauma with a big T or just a small t of like, I'm incredibly stressed now, right? That's kind of a small t thing. You're in your left hemisphere, you're stuck there. So we keep recreating, we are projecting into the now what was. And right. So if you want to be truly present now, do what I call present sing. I like to use the present progressive, the ing, because the moment is always an ing. We're always doing something, right? You have to engage the system that can see and perceive what's actually going on. Is the colleague right there who is just about to trigger me, is that really what he's intending to do? Or is he just stressed himself and I'm just kind of absorbing him because he's my environment right now. He's my societal messaging of what I need and could and should be doing. Anyway, I'm going to pause there. I said a lot of different things and I kind of mentioned things in the model out of order. So we can get back to an order if you want.
Yeah, probably we'll need to when we go into our takeaways. But as I'm thinking and listening to you as well, Marcy, I'm thinking about, the listeners. So think about the entrepreneurs, think about the corporate innovators, trying to find partners, right? To find entrepreneurs, founders who they can collaborate with, investors with their portfolio startups, which they want to bring to the next level of growth. So when we think about that concept, right, of showing up and intentionality, right, which is at the center of the book and the main theme of the book, how can those different stakeholders become more intentional? Because I hear that intentionality can help us grow, can help us, manage our mental health, can help us be, successful if we know how to take advantage of it in the right way.
Right, absolutely. So there are so many different things to say about that. If you want to focus on growing in terms of understanding what the market really wants so that you can target your product. And all of this experience goes back to 25 years as a strategy management consultant. I was with KPMG Consulting as one of the leaders of the high-tech strategy practice for a decade. And then I've continued to do that work on my own for well-known global brands. Just to focus on that one thing of understanding what customers truly want. I mean, the first thing that showing up teaches us, get rid of the word customer. This is a human being. And they're just like us. They have needs, they have wants, they have a path of things throughout their day that they want to achieve. So let's get into a behavioral mindset. It's a very practical thing. When they wake up, what are they going to start to do? And how does what they want to achieve throughout their day factor into what it is that you're trying to offer? Because there has to be a fit there. So I use what I call jobs to be done, right? Which is what someone wants to achieve. We measure this in a very, very specific algorithmic way using outcome statements. What's the outcome? It's a very measurable thing. An example, actually, Apple Computer used this when it was designing its original iPod. They tested a bunch of outcome statements, such as minimize the time it takes to get my music in the desired order for listening. So you've got a metric, minimize, you've got an object, time, you've got a contextual qualifier, right, in the desired order for listening. And then you have people force rank a bunch of statements so that you can come up with what are the things people really want to achieve, right? Which outcomes are most important relative to the others? And you do this in survey work. You develop the outcome statements with interviews. It's a very practical, easy thing to do. From the interviews, you then develop what the outcome statements are, and then you put a bunch of surveys out there. Once you have what kind of ends up being like a set of features defined, you can figure out, well, what does it mean for them to get the music in the desired order for listening? And how throughout their day are they going to be doing it? Are they going to take it on a run? They're already going to be running. And they're going to be like, okay, I'm going to tee up my stuff, but I've only got 35 minutes, so I have to be on. That'll help you to figure out, how do you instantiate, right? How do you incarnate the solution to that specific need? That is one thing. And the way that this fits in with showing up is because the entire system, just as nature is, right? It's about what needs to be, what is the natural thing that we need to achieve here, right? With the turning of the leaves, it is the intent of the tree to do its thing, to take in the CO2, to put oxygen out, to nourish all the other trees around by sharing the nitrogen and oxygen and all of that, right? There is a natural set of things that people want to achieve given our society, and that's how all of this fits in. Two other quick points: human to human. Don't call it a segment. I mean, come on, because then you are assuming and grouping, and it'll be accurate for none at the level of the human. If you want to use that word segment, a segment is defined not by age or gender or race or zip code or education. A segment is defined by the collective that all want to accomplish that same job. That's how you define it. So it kind of blows up classic marketing. I'll stop there, but I'm
Yeah,
very
absolutely.
available.
You are talking about frameworks we use and talk about every day around, for example, niches and segments. And you're right that we need to move away from demographic to look at psychographic, right? What do people really care for? And I do believe in that when I educate the young ventures, is like, that group of collectors are not based on age. It's about the job they need to get done. And
Right.
so when you start really understanding what are keeping them awake at night, or maybe they just want to go home earlier to be with their family, that is a job to be done as well. So how what you're doing, helping them achieve that outcome.
Right. So what am I doing to help them achieve that outcome? You mean once
So,
they,
well, that is that part of the question, but also when you actually start looking at companies you have worked with,
right,
you have worked with HP, SAP, Cisco, but also you are advising, I
right,
assume, young businesses and much big ones. How do you help them make the shift to actually being intentional, and what are the
right.
results they achieve by doing that? Because we actually use very good example, which are used every day in corporate life, job to be done, and
Yes,
segmentation is an example.
yes, yes, yes. And I also want to quickly credit jobs to be done. It's actually the phrasing of a company called Stratogen. Anthony Ulwick is the founder. Um, so something we didn't talk about just now that really is, I think, what makes the difference for most of the clients that I work with is the human to human aspect. Care. Care. My research shows when I ask the question, how often do you think to yourself, how do I want people to feel in my presence? What's your guess, Sabine, of the percentage of people who say that they think about that?
I would say very low. I think when you start looking into authenticity and intentionality, and I think you have a public face. I remember Jeff Bezos' statement, at the end of the day, you pay attention to what people say when you're not in the room, right? It's where you start becoming a bit more intentional. So I would say maybe 15% of people maybe are trying to really pay attention to those.
So it's a bit more optimistic than that. 27% of people is kind of the going average. And I have evergreen
Okay.
surveys that are out there. So it moves around, but it pretty much stays in that, call it 25% range. So 3 out of 4 people, when we're doing our daily work, we aren't thinking about how do I want others to feel when they engage with the service that my company offers, when they engage with this specific thing that we are putting out on the planet. when we speak with our supplier and we design, let's say, how the information is going to flow or how we're going to relate our systems, how do we want the person to feel? And how do we want it to come through on the other side? Because everything is a flow system and it's a value chain of emotion and values. So we're putting our intent in on one side and it's flowing down, right? So the way that you care is you ask yourself questions like, am I ready for my situation that I'm going into, be it a meeting, a discussion? So each of our roles has a skill, right? There's a self role. The skill is be grounded. I can explain that. It's knowing who you are and why. And it's actually pretty deep and it's an ongoing lifelong effort. Readiness is the skill for our situational role. It can be resetting ourselves. It can be thinking about others. It can be writing notes. But ultimately, you have to reground yourself if you're going to show up well to your moment, right? To that situational role. And then there's a skill for our societal role, which is connectedness with intent to care. The word I put on it is all intelligence, because intelligence makes no sense at all. That's our mirror facing us. That's an inward mindset. It's all about me and what I'm trying to get done. And guess what that does? It puts you into your left hemisphere and you will not really be anywhere specifically. You will be bouncing in and out with your attention, with your concern, with your care, with your engagement. That is not going to lead you to look back and say, that was a meaningful hour of my life, because it won't be a meaningful hour. So what all intelligence describes is that really the skills and knowledge that we need are only inside of us, which is what in the word intelligence suggests. It's actually outside of us, but it's not just in the media and others and books. It's actually in nature. It's in the universe. It's in the way the world works. So that's the skill for a societal role, and it's called all intelligence. And really what it is connectedness with intent to serve. And the way that an entrepreneur can use this, when you tactically look at your schedule each day, think about first, what are the most important kind of 3 parts of my day that I want to show up to? Is it a meeting with some investor? Is it when you are kind of writing a new pitch deck or revising a pitch deck, right? Is it when you come home? And with any of those 3, I would say ready yourself so you can envision, how do I want it to go? Reset your body, be planful, but also as you walk in. So that's the planning part, but every moment also has this impromptu, right? Because we improvise. Every moment is like improv life. And showing up has both that pre-planned aspect, but the in the moment aspect, Sabine, of what's going on, right? How am I reading your expression right now? So the impromptu aspect leads us to need to slow ourselves down so that when someone's coming at you, let's say with a question you weren't prepared for, and it's not in any of your numbers or assumptions, it's not in your deck, it's not in your business model, you need to be able to reground yourself right then and look at the person and respond in a way that shows that you're thinking at the level of someone's individual life and how they want to show up with meaning. So how does your product or service address that, helping someone feel that what they did is meaningful?
And we see that a lot more and more. Actually, purpose is one we hear a lot from younger generation. They want to work with companies with purpose, with meaning, with alignment to, with alignment to their personal goals and objectives. So, when you think about founders and business leaders, they need to foster this type of culture, with their
Yes,
employees
yes.
to help them truly show up. Can you share with us where would you get started, right? What are some of the strategies
To
and
foster
practices?
the culture. This is, and
Yeah.
I'm looking for a specific diagram here. You can actually use showing up as a chart to plot where people are. And then I'll get into the question that you just asked. Companies have come to me and shown that in an important meeting, they have plotted where each person is in their level of each person who they're negotiating with, let's say, is their intelligence high? So are they living in a cognitive world only? Maybe they focus just on numbers, or are they more in marketing or sales where they're focused on more of the relational level? You can plot that by putting their all intelligence high or low. Grounding is the same. So is this person jumpy and they're just going to want to get the meeting done, and right? And you can also plot where they are in their situational presencing and readying, right? So you, for example, I would plot you high on all three, and I can send you a chart of this. I'm not going to find it very, very quickly, but based on the chart, you can decide how you're going to relate to each person who you're meeting with. And the book explains that. Okay. That's the first answer. Tell me again the second half of your question so that I can.
Well, the second half is, what would be the strategies and, some of the practices you would want somebody wanted to help their employees to show up, where do they start?
Right, right. So when it comes to corporate culture, trust is the foundation of everything. And then beyond that, you have to show up with two things. If you're the leader, you have to show up with appropriate power. So that's warmth. So you have warmth and care with authority. And underneath that, you have trust. What enables people to feel that from you is that you say, hey, tell me about your kid's soccer game over the weekend. How is your father feeling? I remember he fell last week. Or, I've noticed you're actually kind of jumping up and running to get coffee. Can you help me to understand? Like, do you feel like there's too much on your plate right now? Or your emails are showing me a certain this or that. So attune to the people and then actually respond, give words to, I'm noticing this about you. Are you feeling this way? Is this true for you? What would be helpful, right? Very much lead from underneath, lead from behind. When you show care, believe me, right then and there, people's nervous systems will visibly reset right with you. Now, you can't show up with this buzzing type of energy of like, I'm going to do a drive-by care session, but I've got a meeting in a minute and a half. So when you show up with care and there's trust built, people will show up differently, not just to each other. They'll show up differently when they're looking at the spreadsheet because those numbers will become real people underneath that. New ideas will come in. Why? Because they'll be more in their right hemisphere. So innovativeness will show up. The other big thing, Sabine, broad thinking, not narrow focused. Because what the right hemisphere does is it brings us up to the mountain. And then we're looking down and we're saying, wow, now I see how the system's working. And all of a sudden it's like, oh my goodness, maybe we can partner with that group over there. Then are you with me?
Oh,
And it's a
yeah,
big,
absolutely.
it is such a shift. You will get
Yeah.
stuff that had eluded you before, that you couldn't even begin to think about because like you were pushing a boulder uphill because you were so left hemisphere just showing up in like do. We don't, that turns our sense, that takes our whole perceiving system offline.
Yeah. No, I can hear that. So it sounds like there is a lot to be done, right? To actually show up. And there is a wonderful book to read as well. So, Marcy, if people want to get to know you more and get into the practice, what should they do? Where can they find you?
I'll tell them where to find me, and then I'm going to give some really practical, quick, easy ways to shift into truly showing up. So, the book is out there on Amazon, How We Choose to Show Up. It became a bestseller. The ebook's out there. I think the price is either 99 cents or $4.99. I'm not sure which it is at the moment. Choose to Show Up is my website. I'm very easy to find. Practical things. Honestly, get back into your sensing system. You can trace a 3 on your palm, which I talk about. You can stretch, you can sit and breathe. Anything that engages your muscular system, your auditory system, focus on a sound, but not like the AC, like not a machine sound. Nature. You can even like suck on a cough drop, but really with your tongue, be present with the texture. So anything that engages your senses will switch you into your sensing system. And since the brain can only be doing one of 3 things, focusing on something, wandering or sensing, this lets go the stressors. I want to bring up, if it's okay, authenticity right now in a very brief way. People are often in one of 4 straight states when they're just showing up. Feeling lesser than, feeling better than, feeling I deserve, or I need to be seen as. These are the inward mindset ways of being that are spoken about by the Arbinger Institute. They're also in a book called The Outward Mindset and a couple other books. The point is, you got to let that go. And the way to be authentic and be real and gain trust and feel like others can trust you is to just rehumanize yourself doing those things that I spoke about. There's a lot of other meditations. I love the one that's just like called just like me. People can look. Anyway, really quick, simple things. You do it over time and you start to truly show up naturally more often.
Yeah, that's superb. And as you were talking, I was thinking about the leadership ladder framework where, you have to acquire trust, to get commitment, and then to go to the high level of the pyramid. But Marcy, thank you so much for joining me on Scouting for Growth. And I hope that a lot of people are going to buy the book and actually inquire ways to be better at showing up. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Scouting for Growth. Please subscribe, share with friends, and leave a 5-star rating. Your rating is so valuable. I review all of them, and my team help me adapt content to meet your needs. Also, connect with me on my preferred channels. I am a B2B growth expert, so you will find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Threads, and X as well as Blue Sky. All information available below. Until next, keep scouting for growth.